This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, Show 12. I got crushed.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers, with your host, Ramsey Majaba. Ramsey recently took up Jiu-Jitsu. Hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, SE Nation. Welcome back to another podcast of We the Sales Engineers. I'm glad you guys are here. I know last week we had Canada Day and the 4th of July here in North America. And if you're anything like my guest today, you took the opportunity to celebrate both. I hope you enjoyed your time off, for those who were able to take some time off, and welcome back to the real world. While you were taking some time off, I took the opportunity to try out Jiu-Jitsu, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to be specific. So I'm 280 pounds, 6'2" human being, mostly muscle, or at least I'd like to think so. One of the guys I was paired with looked me straight in the eyes, and he wasn't as big as me. He was like 220 pounds, maybe my height. Anyways, he looks at me straight in the eyes and tells me, if you try to bench press me, I will crush you. All I can say is that he's a man of his word, and I don't really want to talk about it anymore, so I'm moving on. Today's guest is Tim Mills. Tim owns a third-party recruiter company called Teambuilder Consulting, based out of Ottawa. I met him while I was trying out for this job at Spirent, and he's a great guy. He doesn't have anything to win by talking to me, but he wanted to help as many people as possible, which is kind of my motivation for doing this podcast. So I discussed with Tim today how SEs can move jobs if you're looking for a job, or if for some business reason you no longer have a job, or if you're not an SE and you want to be an SE. And he gave me so much information today that I have had to split my interview with him to 2 sessions. Otherwise, you'll be sitting for an hour and a half straight just listening to us talk. Today's podcast will focus on the qualities of the SE, but the majority of the time will be spent discussing resume strategies. In the next session, we'll be talking about LinkedIn, some other job board strategies, how recruiters get paid, and some other topics. Since we talked about resumes today, he actually even sent me a Word document sample resume. It's from, I guess, someone he recruited. He has the name scrubbed, so it's not a big deal. He sent it to me. You can find that as well as the Teambuilder's website and Tim's profile on LinkedIn on the show notes, which are at wethesalesengineers.com/show12. All right, enough of me babbling. Let's get into the interview. Hey, Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ramsey. How's it going?
Not bad. I tried jiu-jitsu yesterday, so I'm sore. Very, very sore.
I have the same soreness. Mine is in my brain. I celebrated the 4th of July yesterday, and yes, I had a hard time waking up this morning.
Yeah, I woke up easily because I was in pain, but then I had a hard time getting out of bed.
So. Exactly, yes. Yep. Me too.
Okay, well, I'm glad we're on the same page. Like, we're bringing this show really down very quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're down to earth right now, I feel.
Yeah. So, for people who don't know you, do you mind introducing yourself and what you do?
For sure. Well, my name's Tim Mills, and I run a small Ottawa-based recruiting company called Teambuilder. We primarily, I would say, place, largely Americans, Canadians, Europeans, into jobs in their respective communities. We consider ourselves to be true headhunters, but, I think when we were discussing offline, what we hope to do is just kind of help out SEs or possibly future SEs, be better acquainted with the recruiting process, how we carry out our duties, and, help them be better armed to go through interviews and, negotiate salary and of the like, I guess I could say.
Yeah, one of the questions that I keep getting is that, hey, I want to be an SE. I don't have any experience as an SE. How can I get to be an SE, which is required as a experience.
Absolutely.
So okay.
And you know what? Out of all the jobs within tech, I mean, usually that's not music to our ears as recruiters, especially third-party recruiters. We're us headhunters, are paid basically on a commission only, and generally that's not music to our ears, except when SEs or possible, technical people want to move into sales engineering. It's one place where if you have a technical background, maybe you've got a CS degree, or you've got some form of a technical degree or college diploma, you understand technology, you've built an app, you've built something on the web, whatever. That's number one. You need to be technical. Number two, you really enjoy people, customers. In my industry, we would call it your client facing. You have good soft skills. That's the second thing. So if you've had an R&D job for a number of years, working as a programmer, a developer, an architect, especially on the delivery side, maybe a program manager, project manager, again, all very technical, client facing. It's pretty easy. Actually, I shouldn't use the word easy, but it's easier to move over into a sales engineering role. There's a number of firms out there, especially, in my world, in the DevOps field, but it could be anything really, anything software, hardware, firmware, that want folks that have developed recently, with recent development experience, and then within a year or, 2 years of that, they would view you as a better technical resource to be able to communicate with clients and work with the sales reps.
So I would like to step back. CS, that's computer science, just to be clear.
Yeah. Computer science seems to be a big one in Ottawa right now, but computer science degree. But it could be, again, anything. Electrical engineering, maybe in your field, Ramsey. Anything that is kind of technical, but also, as you probably also know, we're lucky kind of in our worlds that when we work with computers, I feel like there is a bit of leeway with a lot of companies that, the big companies want you to have your formal designation from a higher school, but if you learned it on your own in your basement kind of thing, then that may, and you just got work experience, then sometimes there's leeway there as well.
Okay, and you mentioned that someone has to be technical, or if he is technical with a customer-facing role, then it'll be easy for them to get a job, or at least they might be able to find a job. What about technical people who are in DevOps that don't talk to customers at that time?
I still think it's fine. If they have good communication skills. That's, again, an industry term, comm skills. It shows up when I submit a new candidate. The things I'm listing off are not only the bullet form notes about the requirement and how the candidate matches it, but I'm always listing off the communication skills. So if you feel that you're, folks that just are naturally good communicators, or, in their respective companies right now, if you find yourself always kind of chatting up other members of other teams, you sort of enjoy that social interaction, then, I usually will, in my world anyway, I'm like, hey, have you ever thought of being an SE? Just thinking in terms of, the financial benefits of moving over.
Yeah, I see that as well. I talk to a few people who don't face customers, and they just show confidence when they talk to me, and I feel like they could actually pass as good SEs.
Yeah, exactly. And potentially, I mean, obviously, yourself included, I mean, there can be some differences between what you would make in more of a DevOps or a delivery role, versus a pure development role. And then, when you move into becoming an SE, then sometimes there's some greater financial rewards for doing that.
So, in your experience, just to incentivize people who want to be SE, because I believe there's a shortage of SEs. In your experience, what would be the difference of a DevOps engineer and a sales engineer in the same company?
It very well could be $50,000. I mean, generally I default. Is your audience tend to be more Canadian or U.S. or Full
Both.
North American, Ramsey?
North American, mostly.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, I think, and when I say 50, it could be in Canadian or USD, but I would say it's probably that much. I mean, an intermediate senior SE in the States, especially, California, New York, Boston, some of the hotbeds right now, I would say, an on-target earnings somewhere between 160 and 200. I know it's a broad range. Canada, I would say, is probably a touch lower. But I mean, there's usually the base salary and the variable component, which is commission based. But also, I usually tell SEs immediately, especially with those that are coming from more technical, programming backgrounds, that the commission. You could share this to yourself, your own experience, but the commissions, it tends to be more flat. You're working with multiple sales reps. So even though there is a commission component, it's not like a sales rep where your commissions could really fluctuate because you're working with so many sales guys. You're making commissions on each one monthly, so it tends to feel flat. So if you have families at home and you want to keep a fairly non-static salary, generally you're safer and still making more money.
From my experience, I work with only one sales guy, so I don't have that same experience as. So my commission is tied to whatever the salesperson closes. But on the other hand,
right.
I do have a very good base to the point where
right.
I'm not as worried. And as sales engineers, you usually have a good base.
Yeah.
What's the range of the base?
Well, what I would say is, just to speak to what you just said there too, with sales reps in North America, we tend to look at, if you're just an individual contributor, a senior sales guy, it still tends to be somewhere around a 50-50 split. If you're junior intermediate, it's definitely a 50-50 split, 50% base, 50% variable. As you get more senior, maybe you become manager of sales, director, VP, then it can break out a little further to the base side. We could go 60-40. And also if you're, a VP, it might even be as high as 75, but, that's more rare. On the sales engineering side, I do find that, it's a 60-40 split. 75-25 split is very common. The base salaries for an SE, it's a broad range. It depends on the company. I know the company that you're with pays quite well. American-based, California-based company. Good pay rates. I would say the average might be, this is a broad range, but 80 to 120 in base. It could be higher with a smaller variable. I see all spectrums, Ramsey, so it's hard for me to lock that down because in technology and also years experience considered, it can be a bit broad.
Yeah, I was just asking from a percentage standpoint, which you already answered. So it's 80-20 or 75-25, could be 70-30.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But generally speaking, there's a good base for SEs. And now that we've incentivized people to look at being an SE, if they enjoy talking to people and working with other people, what can brand new or aspiring SEs do to differentiate themselves from experienced SEs or other people who are aspiring to be SEs?
Well, that's a big question. I can give you some, like we talked earlier about some of the bullets that I would usually cover off, when I'm helping friends or family or folks that are kind of looking to get in. So I don't know if this is a good time to sort of break into that, but
that was my intention was to lead you into those bullet points, but I did a crappy job.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So the cue has been accepted.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll begin now.
Thank you. It's not obvious at all right now.
No, we're being very down to earth right now, Ramsey. So resume strategy, I'd probably start with. Start with that because it's going to, parlay over to LinkedIn strategy, social media, and everything else. So I'll start with that. But a lot of your listeners are likely old pros, but I'll go over some of the basics just in case.
I do have some aspiring SEs or brand new SEs that reached out to me. So we have those.
think in terms of bullet form. They say the average manager, that's hiring for a position, a lot of times they view the hiring aspect of their job. They don't like it. It's a burden to them. They have their day job that takes up, their 40 plus hours per week, and they also have to hire. So it's an additional burden. There's pressure on them. There's risks that they don't hire well. The average manager, they say, reads a resume much like headlines. I know my third-party recruiters, we're agency recruiters, but most of my team could read a resume in 15 seconds or less. So bullet form, think like headlines in a newspaper. Keep it very, bulleted. No long sentences. No, you can do 2 sentences. Some people like to do sort of an objective or a profile where you're saying, hey, this is who I am and this is what I do in a paragraph at the top. If you're one of those people, go ahead, but 2 sentences. I prefer the folks that will name off the top things that you've done as you think a prospective manager would like to see in a section at the top, 8 bullets long. Think quantitative data. So, to talk, something similar to an SE, it pairs really well, I think, is if I needed a sales rep and an aspiring sales rep wants to get with me, in your profile section, list off the things that a sales manager would like to see. So when you hit President's Club, name the years, your quota, and then, semicolon, what you achieved in the last 3 years. And that could maybe even go on the same line. The biggest numbers that were closed, that you've closed, things like that. Really specific data. Don't round ever. We all assume as humans that if someone asks you a question, what did you make? What did your team make last year? In terms of going against your quota. Someone's like, well, I did close to 1.1. No, don't say it that way. Say that you made, that your sales guy closed, 1,389,000, 222, whatever. If you say the number, it's immediate. Boom, message received. That was the exact number, and move on. There's no questioning. So that's just a little sidebar.
So, sorry, if we can dig on that.
Sure.
Why
Go
is
ahead,
that?
stop me.
Why is that important?
I just think it's a subliminal thing. In that when you round, if you give a flat number, whether you're negotiating salary and you say, well, I'm used to making 130. Well, I've assumed that in your last 3 years, you probably didn't achieve 130. You made just shy of. But if you give the exact number, then I'll believe you immediately and I move forward. You know what I mean? So I'm going to get to that when we talk about the salary piece. That was just kind of an example, but you know what I mean? If you give the exact numbers, if you have the exact numbers, then I feel like it has more substance to it. Your buyer will hear the messaging like immediately and just kind of move on. They're not going to, second guess or question what you've said.
Okay, so they won't ask the question, what was the number exactly, if you already gave them the exact number.
And again, this is philosophical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're asking me my opinion, and I love it when people give me the exact number. And if you give me a rounded number, I assume that you rounded up.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And you might have rounded way up. I don't know that, but if you give the exact number, then I usually, I believe it.
Okay.
So just my, again, philosophical. Resume, again, back to that. So tailoring your resume to a job. So let's say that you found a few jobs that you really want to apply to. I'm of the mindset that we don't do blanket blasts, where you're just constantly applying that same resume to multiple jobs. You can do that strategy. You're going to have to do more work in the long run, I think, to finally get a bite. If you see a job that you really like, then I usually recommend, in some ways, I even say get physical copies, print off the job description, print off your resume in pen, or with your word processor open. Speak to your profile section at the top, those top 8 bullets, 10 bullets, whatever. Speak to what that job description is asking for. So generally, the way a manager does these things, they hate doing it. They spew it out of their brain. what do I need? What am I looking for here? The top 3, the top 5 that they list off in a requirement section or a qualification section are typically the most important to them. So speak to that in that first section at the very top of your resume, whether you call it profile or summary. 1, 2, 3, keep it tight. No run-on sentences, really short, crisp. And then look at each job that you did. And again, where you're fully immersed in that job description, revamp each job to speak to what they're looking for. And I don't say this to say, you should be lying on your resume or whatever. What I'm thinking is you're highlighting what's most important to that prospective manager. Push aside or just it's further down your list of describing your job. To talk about some of the other stuff you might have on there. You've got great penmanship. You can, you know what I mean? Or in the olden days, people used to write that. Or, good with the Microsoft suite of products or whatever. It's like, I don't care. Like,
I hope so.
How much did your sales guy make last year? The things that they're asking for on, that JD, you might look at each job and revamp it to speak to that JD in order. When one more point on that, why that is as well is whether you're a third-party recruiter like myself or you're a corporate recruiter that works within a company, what we are in a lot of cases is we're less technical. We understand business benefits. We're highly paid word matchers. Most of us have two screens. We have one with a JD and we have the other with our LinkedIn or whatever we're using, where we're cycling resumes with the JD on the other side, and we're matching words. And also how LinkedIn works, I'll get to this further too. It shows in yellow highlight when we do our search. Think Boolean search. Yellow highlight. So if your resume is scattered with yellow, and it's like, whoa, you've got my attention when I pull your resume up. And again, it's 15 seconds less to scan your resume, 10.
And JD is job description, right?
Yes,
Okay.
It is, yeah.
And like when you say highlight in yellow, you have like a word search that searches for specific terms or...
Yeah.
And
we buy, in terms of LinkedIn, us recruiters, we buy the LinkedIn recruiter service. So, for example, my company, I have outside contractors, but I do a deal with 3 members of my team where I take care of their LinkedIn costs. It's $1,500 a month.
Okay.
So, it's quite dear. It gets cheaper as your team gets bigger, but yeah, most of us are using the same software. Most of us in North America, as recruiters, our go-to is LinkedIn. That's where we start. So, if your resume can be bullet form highlighting, buzzwords, specific technologies, that you've worked with Hadoop, you've worked with big data, robotics, C++, Java, whatever it is, Python. It needs to show up in each of your jobs so that when we do our searches, it's just this smattering of yellow. It gets our attention.
Okay. And I want to step back for a second. You mentioned like for salespeople, have your quota and how much you did, your biggest achievements, how many times you hit you got to the President's Club. Is that the same for SEs as well?
Yes, I think it's possibly a lesser degree because I find sales engineering managers. I mean, obviously, I think I know your particular manager, but your manager, I feel like, he thinks that way too. He thinks like a sales manager. So yeah, I think it is beneficial.
Yeah, nobody likes my manager. That's.
Yeah, I like your manager.
Okay. You have to say that. He's gonna hear it.
Is he gonna hear this?
No, I don't know. I don't think.
Hey, Matt.
This is getting awkward. Hey, Matt, we love you. Don't fire me, please.
We love you. Yeah. We love you.
All right. What about aspiring SEs who don't have that information? They've never hit quota or never actually had a quota to hit. You just bypass that.
Still quantitative. So then we switch to years experience. So put those bullets. You want to get into a company that is largely delivering a product that's Perl Python. So I would say just seek out in that JD again. Look at the top 5 bullets. Whether it's qualifications or requirements, they're going to use one of those 2 words. they're going to list off technologies that you've got experience programming in or delivering or whatever. So then switch over to years experience that you have in that. So top bullet, if you see that they've used Python 5 times, okay, it's definitely a Python shop. List off at the very top, 7 years Python. Next bullet, whatever the other technology is. So if you're coming from the R&D side or architecture or, you know what I mean, QA, delivery, whatever, you list off specifically the number of years in that technology. So the technology buzzword comes up in my search, and also it shows me, because oftentimes what we're asking as recruiters when we get the manager on the phone, we take on a new job is, how senior are we looking? That's one of the first questions. How many years experience? How technical? You know what I mean? Like, it's usually based on years, and we pair that back against salary. So
this brings up,
those would be kind of a way.
So I have 2 questions for you. When you say like 7
Sure.
years experience, are you writing the number 7 or the word 7? Does it make a difference? That might be a stupid question.
Yes, I think so. So I know, like, in when we write emails and whatnot, they would tell us good grammar is to spell out the word 7. You know what I mean? However, in a resume, I think it's better to use the actual number, the numeric. I think it's better. It's just, again, sticking with the bullet form, the headline type basis. That's the way that we submit you when we pull this stuff out of your resume. Us third parties will, we could do up a 1-page or bullet form as well, speaking directly to, based on our calls, based on your resume, just so the manager doesn't even have to pull up your resume. It's like, this guy's got this. You know what I mean? And, if they see all that, it's like, boom, got their attention. Guy's probably getting an interview right there. And now, some would look at the resume right then and there. Some, quick scan, but they've already made their decision. And you're off to the races,
All right. Sounds good. So
cool.
So
I got a few more
Go ahead.
points on the resume, but at the same time, feel free to, you can move me over if you prefer.
No. I would like to have a complete resume, and then we'll move over to LinkedIn. We'll try to hit the most important points first.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about tailoring, flow. So keep in mind, another thing we evaluate in resumes is, did a candidate move around? Are they what we call in industry a job jumper? So ideally, what you're trying to do is you're trying to stay in a job for at least 2 years. More than 2 is better. Realizing we've all been through situations that, maybe weren't what they were proposed to be. You needed to leave early, or maybe just someone, sought you out, really wanted you, paid you way more money, you moved, whatever. You've got these different little, places in your resume, but also maybe your company took a downturn and, sales might have gotten let go first. You're part of sales. That happens. So, keep in mind that at the very end, I look at a resume first in terms of the the buzzwords, where the match was, what the person is. At the end, I do another scan about the dates. So think of the dates of your resume. A lot of people will do month and year of a job, so it kind of shows how long you've been at a company. If you have any holes in your resume, if you got let go and you were without a job for a number of months, then don't list the months in your entire resume. Just put year to year. So it's a way of sort of just not showcasing that you were without work for 6 months, 8 months, whatever. It raises flags, even though it happens to the best of us. So just remove the months that you had, April 2018, whatever. Just put 2018, and do that throughout your resume, just so it's all concise. Just one last kind of strategy there. Also, if anyone ever asks you a direct question, when did you start that job? They won't. They don't have the time. But make sure you answer truthfully. Give the dates if they ever ask for it. Give the truthful dates. A lot of times people don't care. But they'll gauge you on. It'll be largely a truth test. Does this candidate? Maybe they had a soft reference. They knew someone that worked at your previous company. They had heard that, and you're best to answer truthfully, but that's just one little, sidebar where it usually doesn't come up, and it's a way just to prevent the questions on. oh, I noticed you were out of work for a while. What happened? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
That's good.
so that's my, you know, oh, one last thing. Actually, you know what? The last thing I don't think is applicable to SEs. I was going to say there's two types of resumes, a contract resume versus a permanent resume, but I think with sales engineers, they tend to be permanent employees. So I think there likely isn't the split that I would see in other roles.
All right. Well, if you don't think it's worth saying, then we'll move on. I do have a question.
Yep. Sure. Go
Lots
ahead.
of people move move jobs within the same company. Like if it's a big company, does that count as
Yep.
job jumping as well?
No, not at all. But make sure in your resume, the way that I want to see that is, you know, you've chosen certain headings, maybe fonts, maybe it's a larger font, whatever. What I want to see is listed off in the bigger font or, you know, the big whatever, you know, each job. So you were with a company. For example, in my background, I was with this company, Watchfire. They were a cybersecurity company, web app security, early stages. And we were bought by IBM. So what I'd like to see is show me how that was, Watchfire, you know, and in brackets, now IBM. Like I want to see it so that it shows that you're at the same company, that you didn't move from Watchfire to another company, IBM, within a year, or if you got a promotion as you're describing, show it where you've got the big heading where it's IBM and that your titles are in a lower font kind of within that. You know what I mean? Maybe it's you've chosen to put your dates of when you were at IBM. It was all of, you know, 2010 to 2018, and then below it you can put the other dates within that. But just keep that in mind though, because some people will do it where it looks like you're at a different place, and they could discard you immediately. Where it's like, oh, this guy's a jumper, you know, he moves around too much, and some managers are really cautious about that. So keep that in mind when you're writing out your profile.
So basic tip is make it easy for whether it is recruiters or managers to read your resume and know exactly where you are. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have a sample resume that you can share? I don't put any on the spot, so feel free to say no, it's not a big deal. But if you do
I don't care. Yeah, I do. And one that I use, and this would go back to that quantitative aspect. I've got a sales resume, Ramsey. I think that I know that we're talking about sales engineers, but I don't know. My main example tends to be sales, just because I feel like I can articulate, you know, with that example of sales. Everyone knows sales is very quantitative. It's very numbers. So if that would be helpful, I can share that with you offline.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share that with my listeners or?
Yep. Yeah, you're welcome to. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I've got the names scrubbed already, and I call it a sales resume, and you could just see the way that this particular gentleman had listed himself off. And I just felt like, you know, sales managers, sales engineer managers, I feel like they do think in a similar way. There's more of a technical basis, like a little bit more technical, but you'll still get, you know, I think an understanding of how they want to read your resume, I think.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think people can interpolate how to edit it to fit being a sales engineer. And if they can't, maybe they don't deserve to be sales engineers.
Maybe that's the case.
Yeah, we'll filter out some possibilities. Thank you so much for your time, Tim. We'll have to finish this interview next week. Tim was worried that he talked too much, but I found everything that he was saying was so informative. I have a job. I'm not looking for a new job. So even though I'm in that situation, I was interested in what he had to say. The sample resume that Tim sent can be found at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show12. It's a Word document, so it's not a PDF. You can download it and adapt it to your needs. It's targeted more or it's written by an account manager, but we are SEs and we solve problems like this for our account managers, so you can take that and change it to what works for you. So before we go, I do have a request. If you find this if you find this podcast useful for you, and you think it'll be useful for other people as well, I do request that you review it on iTunes or SoundCloud or wherever you listen to it. If you don't have time to review it, please at least rate it. This will help other people who are interested in this topic to find the show easier. I got nothing else to say. I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate you spending your time with me. I don't see you, so I'm happy that you guys are doing that. I'm happy that I'm able to provide something that's useful for you guys. Enough with the mushy gushy. This is Ramsey signing off.